And I've actually seen financial panics. And one of the things about being an American is I find Americans pretty pompous and arrogant, saying, well, this won't happen to America. And if you're really going to study financial education, it does take in history. And we have seen throughout history financial collapses, booms, and busts caused because governments manipulate money supply. So right now, the United States, for the very first time in about probably 100 years, is now starting to sweat, is my dollar for real, right?
Yes.
So what do you think is happening?
There's a major panic going on with the Federal Reserve and the banking systems. Like I've said before, they've created in just the past 18 months, they've created about 150%, 1.5 times, more paper dollars than they created in the first 200 years of the United States. So they've added 1.5 times more currency to the what's called base money, the paper dollars. They're trying to prevent a disaster that they see out there right now.
But the reason I have Marco and David here, and Kim, is you guys have actually lived through what's called devaluations, or there's another word coming up that people will hear more of. It's called sovereign default. Sovereign default. A sovereign default means a country goes bankrupt. They say we can't pay our bills. That's individual bankruptcy, but a sovereign default is like a country of Greece says, that's it, or Turkey could go, and they said, that's it. But you guys have seen it in Mexico, right?
Well, in the early 80s, I remember the government took over the banks, and then they made it illegal to have dollars for the citizens. They frozen your dollars accounts, and then they devaluate the dollar, so you end up having like 10% or 20% of your real money. I mean, I remember my father, all his savings accounts will be in dollars because he thought that dollars will be safe,
But the government actually says you can't hold dollars?
No,
Yep.
the government, well, first they took over the banks. They nationalized the banks.
Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, first the banks used to be private, and then the government took over the banks, and then once the government owned the banks, then they frozen all your dollar accounts. So suddenly, if you had let's say you have $1,000, well, they give you 12,000 pesos. But then the following day, those 12,000 pesos is only $100. So you lost 90% of your value.
Wow.
And
So
you
that's-
wake up in the morning, and this has already happened, right?
Yes.
You don't get any warning.
So you lost $900 by the devaluation.
Immediately, overnight. And what happened is most businesses, they close the following day because they need to remark their pricing. So business owners, a lot of business owners, and I actually have several friends that did a lot of money because they had a lot of inventory, and they just sell it with the new pricing.
It was horrible, especially if David and I grew up by the border, Tijuana, San Diego, and it was horrible because you were making pesos, and then the next day the peso would be worth half. And you had debt in dollars. Like if you bought a car, you were paying your car in dollars, and you were making half of your salary, and you earned double of it's horrible, just
So
a
your
nightmare.
debt went up tenfold with that devaluation, basically.
Exactly,
right?
and it would happen again and again, and it felt so unfair.
I think that the government planned it very well because I remember very well that my father used to have a part of his money in San Isidro in the U.S. and part of his money in Mexico. And then they raised the interest rates in Mexico that it was so attractive for you to invest your dollars in Mexico's banks.
Before they did all this.
Before they took over the banks and before that. So suddenly
So they
you
got
say,
all these US dollars.
You say, oh, I'm going to bring my money back to Mexico because I'm making a lot of return.
Wow.
The interest rates are 20, 25%. I mean, I'm making a lot of money. It was better. They played it in a way that it was better to put your money in the bank even than creating a business or something because they were paying 25, 30%. So suddenly when they got all those dollars there, then they close it.
So what advice would you have for the people who have never been through one of these crises?
Well, first of all, I think you have to get as many assets as possible because I realized that everybody who was a business owner or had real estate or had gold and silver, they end up on the top of the food chain. I mean, if you are protected using all those assets, who cares what happened to the currency? I mean, the real estate is eventually is going to hold their value, and gold and silver is going to hold the value. And if you have a business, you can always, just you're going to just change pricing all the time. I mean.
And I mean, David was raised in the Jewish community, so he had more financial education than I did, being Catholic. So he has a way of unfair advantage over me being Catholic, you know what I mean? So for me, it's just grasping the concept of the currency not being the real money.
We've never been here in the history of the world. If the U.S. dollar goes, the world goes with it. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It backs every other currency on the planet right now.
So what they saw in Mexico will repeat all over the world, worldwide. So please get smart. If you don't have any knowledge, buy some gold and silver.